Monday, May 9th, Abraham's Doubts. Genesis 16, 1-16 says, Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarah said to Abram, The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram agreed with Sarah's proposal. So Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress Sarah with contempt. Then Sarah said to Abram, This is all your fault. I put my servant into your arms, but now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me. Abram replied, Look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit. Then Sarah treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. The angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness along the road to Shur. The angel of the Lord said to her, Hagar, Sarah's servant, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress, Sarah, she replied. The angel of the Lord said to her, Return to your mistress and submit to her authority. Then he added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. And the angel also said, You are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears. For the Lord has heard your cry of distress. This son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fists against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives. Therefore, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord, who had spoken to her. She said, You are the God who sees me. She also said, Have I truly seen the one who sees me? So that well was named Beer-lahai-roi, which means, Well of the living one who sees me. It can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. What is the significance of Abram's decision to go with Hagar, even despite God's promise to him? How do the two women represent two attitudes of faith? When Abram doubted, Genesis 15:2, God unambiguously reassured him that he would have a son. Years later, Abram is still without a son. Even after God's last powerful prophecy, Abram seems rather to have lost his faith. He does not believe anymore that it will be possible for him to have a son with Sarai. Sarah, feeling hopeless, takes the initiative and urges him to resort to a common practice of that time. In the ancient Near East, take a surrogate. Hagar, Sarah's servant, is appointed for this service. The system works. Ironically, this human strategy seemed more efficient than did faith in God's promises. The passage describing Sarah's relation to Abram echoes the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The two texts share a number of common motifs. Sarah, like Eve, is active. Abram, like Adam, is passive and share common verbs and phrases. Heed the voice, take, and give. This parallel between the two stories implies God's disapproval of this course of action. The Apostle Paul refers to this story to make his point about works versus grace, Galatians 4:23-26. In both accounts, the result is the same. The immediate reward of human work outside the will of God leads to future troubles. Note that God is absent during the whole course of action. Sarah speaks about God but never speaks to him, nor does God speak to either of them. This absence of God is striking, especially after the intense presence of God in the previous chapter. God then appears to Hagar, but only after she has left the house of Abram. This unexpected appearance discloses God's presence in spite of human attempts to work without him. The reference to the angel of the Lord, Genesis 16:7, is a title that is often identified with the Lord, Yahweh. See Genesis 18:1, 13, and 22. This time, it is God who takes the initiative and announces to Hagar that she will give birth to a son, Ishmael, whose name means God hears, Genesis 16:11. Ironically, the story, which ends with the idea of hearing, Shama, echoes the hearing at the beginning of the story, when Abram heeded, Shama, the voice of Sarah, Genesis 16:2. Why is it so easy for us to have the same lack of faith that Abram had here? From the book Patriarchs and Prophets, page 145, it says, Abraham had accepted without question the promise of a son, but he did not wait for God to fulfill his word in his own time and way. A delay was permitted to test his faith in the power of God, but he failed to endure the trial. Thinking it impossible that a child should be given her in her old age, Sarah suggested, as a plan by which the divine purpose might be fulfilled, that one of her handmaids should be taken by Abraham as a secondary wife. Polygamy had become so widespread that it had ceased to be regarded as a sin, but it was no less a violation of the law of God, and was fatal to the sacredness and peace of the family relation. Abraham's marriage with Hagar resulted in evil, not only to his own household, but to future generations. From the book Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 303, it says, God gives light to guide those who honestly desire light and truth, but it is not his purpose to remove all cause for questioning and doubt. He gives sufficient evidence to found faith upon, and then requires men to accept that evidence and exercise faith. He who will study the Bible with a humble and teachable spirit will find it a sure guide, pointing out the way of life with unfailing accuracy. But what does your study of the Bible avail, brethren and sisters, unless you practice the truth it teaches? That holy book contains nothing that is non-essential. Nothing is revealed that has not a bearing upon our actual lives. The deeper our love for Jesus, the more highly we shall regard that word as the voice of God directly to us.